Okay, everyone, welcome. Let's get started. So thank you for joining us today for Transformations Delivering Sustainable Cost Efficiencies, Lessons from a COO. Next slide, please. Now, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all, but just make you aware that we're going to record the webinar so that those people who've registered and want to watch the replay can do so. I'd like to ask you to submit questions at any time via our Zoom Q&A tool, please. And then we're going to run today to about 45 minutes with questions over the last 15 to 10 minutes. Now, the agenda for today is welcomes and introductions here. So I'm going to hand over in a moment to Alex Rebkowski, our senior partner, founder and managing director at ADAPTOVATE. Alex is going to be talking with Ghaleb. I'll let him introduce it fully in a moment. Then towards the end, we'll have a Q&A from all those questions you've put into the Q&A tool for me. And we'll endeavor to answer as many questions as we can in the 45 minutes we have today. So Alex, over to you, please.
Thanks, Nick. Welcome, everyone. So very quickly, so I do want to introduce as well, before I do a marketing plug, Ghaleb El Masri, so who's actually a dear friend of mine. I was counting how many years we know each other, and I think it's something around 14, 15 years. So we spent quite a lot of time together at ING. But you know, Ghaleb is a former COO and Chief Transformation Officer at NN, so Nationale Nederlanden. Formerly, this was formerly ING Insurance and Asset Management Europe. He was part of the transformation team at ING. First, he worked on completing one of the largest restructuring and divestment programs in the world during the financial crisis. This was when ING has decided to split their banking and insurance businesses, and Ghaleb has been played an integral part in that. And then he followed by the next chapter in ING's transformation to grow and focus on organizational agility as well. He has a broad experience within the financial services industry and across the business lifecycle, ranging from the launch of new business lines and greenfield operations to scaling and growing businesses, as well as restructuring, divestments, and IPO. So a really, really broad experience. And it's my great honor to be talking to him. And it definitely, as I mentioned, we know each other for a while, so it brings back good memories as well. So Ghaleb, welcome, and it's great to have you here. So look, before we jump in,
pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Before we jump into the kind of the gist of it, I just wanted to quickly introduce ADAPTOVATE to everyone. So look, we are a boutique management consulting firm that specializes in business agility and transformations. And you know, we started in 2017 in Australia, and have been growing quite quickly, and we have now offices across 10 locations. We, you know, among other things, kind of what I'm really proud of is, you know, around this growth, we've been named one of the fastest growing consulting firms by Financial Times and Statista APAC. And we currently have around 150 staff all around the world. And Ghaleb is, apart from being a former COO, he also leads our Canadian office. Look, what we specialize is we specialize in delivering integrated consulting and coaching capabilities, which is really a very pragmatic approach to business agility. It's a unique combination of strategy and execution. There you know, the three founders, including myself, has kind of worked in the past for companies like Boston Consulting Group. So we bring the strategy, a little bit of the strategy consulting heritage, and we have all of our people have deep expertise in all aspects of business agility, including kind of one of the key parts of it, which is also creating efficiencies for companies around the world. So moving on, Ghaleb, I think it would be I think we need to start. So look, obviously this is a conversation, right, about your experiences and what you've done in the past around large scale transformations, as well as building those efficiencies, so within financial services. So kind of to kick it off, obviously, the economic situation is on everyone's mind at the moment. High inflation, everyone waiting for for another GFC, potential GFC or not. Do you think that the current economic situation means that there is a greater need to transform financial services companies?
Yeah, Alex, I think it does. I think it does, because right now we're really in a period, and what we're seeing across many organizations and some of the discussions that we're having is that it's a time of uncertainty. It's tough to make certain decisions as well, because there really are secular changes happening. We're at the end of one of the longest bull markets in history. We're now in a period after very low interest rates for a long time, going into a period of rapid interest rate increases. So the environment around the organizations is in flux and is in a different direction than it was before. So, what does it mean? We wanted to talk about the financial services sector and my experience, my prior experience there as well. So from a banking perspective, what this means is that on the short term, there's probably more income. The net interest rate income increases. So because of higher interest rates, they can loan out money for more. There's a bigger spread between loans and savings that they have to offer, and there's more revenue. However, this is only short term, because we know inflation, as you mentioned, has been rapidly increasing. So that increases the cost base. There'll be fee compression, because at some point, the spread they were making on the increase in interest rates won't last. They'll have to offer higher interest rates to deposit holders. And as we all know, there's more need for regulatory as well, initiatives. So those costs can also increase. So on the short term, it may look like there might be an improvement in profitability, but I think there's a lot of additional items there that have to be addressed along with the uncertainty. So it is a very transformative time for banks. And I think many are looking to how they can improve costs and profitability now to set them up beyond the short-term benefit of rising interest rates. I think for insurance and asset management, similar headwinds as well. It's the tail end of a bull market. Investment returns were really good. Higher interest rates now lead to a decrease in equity and bond values. So there's no easy market returns. So in addition to rethinking how to improve revenue and different types of investment strategies, another way to improve profitability is to focus on cost and taking out costs and profitability. So similar challenges, highly transformative and disruptive times, and it's difficult to tell the exact path it's going to take.
No, absolutely. And I think, also looking at, and you mentioned kind of also other, not only economic situation, but for example, the rise of AI and blockchain and how the financial services will be using that as well to create efficiency. And that kind of also brings, an interesting angle, because those changes will not only be happening, if we look at some of those changes, we immediately think about technology. They will also be happening on the people side, and kind of after such a long bull market, it's also important to potentially relook at the ways of working and how do you approach those problems. And so it's not only kind of hard cost cutting from process perspective or technology, introducing new technologies and so on, but also from the ways of working. So look, jumping into kind of also from that perspective and your personal experience, right, and your history with transformations and what has been happening. So can you tell us, when you go back and kind of think of the largest transformation, what was the situation you inherited? Where was the organization, and what was the challenge that you had to address? So I think that would be that would be quite interesting to understand.
Yeah, sure. And maybe the example I'll pick, Alex, was when we transformed one of the business NN. So this organization and that I was part of, and was the COO and Chief Transformation Officer, was the market leader in insurance and asset management within that country, and the market leader so in life insurance and pension products, and a leader in asset management. And this leadership position was largely due to great success 20 and 10 years ago in the launch of their life insurance and pension product in that country. And they continued to build on that market share until the last few years. In the last few years, there were a lot of entries by fintechs, other financial services providers who were faster to market with the new wave of product innovation. The new products in the insurance and asset management space that really were finding product market fit. And from that perspective, our organization had not entered those new areas of growth, had not been able to innovate at the pace of others, and they were rapidly growing new market areas. So our overall market position was eroding away because we weren't able to move fast and get on with the new product innovation that was needed. That's on the revenue and innovation side and the new products and the market leadership. On the cost side, you'll notice that though we were market leaders, we didn't have any operating leverage. So what this means is that we were market leaders. We had a large fixed asset base in terms of the sales force, in terms of the number of sites we had in the country, in terms of other advantages you would have as a market leader. But for every additional unit of revenue, our costs were increasing by the same amount. And you would expect that as a market leader, there would be more benefits. You would be able to scale better. So that was the challenge we were trying to unlock in transforming the organization to focus more on improving the execution and performance to get that operational leverage, to be able to move faster and deliver value sooner on those new product trends and those new markets that were opening up. And to get that change in performance and execution, we had to really change the mindset and the culture and the capabilities, and not ones just for the short term, but to be longer lasting. So, maybe I would summarize it, Alex, in terms of setting the scene, that the three big questions we were asking was, one, how can we get faster speed to market in our products sooner? And then what does that take to do that? Two, we've got a lot of initiatives, though we weren't the fastest. So how can we drive focus and prioritization to make sure that the ones we wanted counted and were done as quickly as possible? And then lastly, from a cost and productivity perspective, what are the inefficiencies out there? What are the inefficiencies due to coordination or due to spend or other elements? And how can we then streamline and eliminate that? So we took a transformation really to address those items together on cost reduction, but also on organizational agility and performance and execution.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting because there's almost with the goals you guys had, there's a bit of a contradiction in what you're trying to achieve. On one hand, move a lot quicker, but then on the other hand, also reduce cost, right? Which is and eliminate those efficiencies. And very often we hear from the companies and people we work with that this is very hard to achieve, and how do you marry that? And obviously, yes, organizational agility can help, but I always, very often in here, I also get a very interesting question from around that organizational agility as the fact, it's great, agile is great in delivering very small incremental change, but how do you actually focus on more strategic things like, cost, reducing cost efficiency across the whole company and the group? And I think it's absolutely brilliant that you kind of talk about, the focus and the prioritization that's necessary as well on the leadership level to get that. So kind of moving on and on this. So what did what did NN kind of what organizational capability look like at that time to deliver this change?
Yeah, and Alex, maybe before I answer that, I'll just address what you mentioned. I think it's absolutely true, and you and I know this as well. Usually when there's a decrease in revenue, when there's a recessionary period or there's a slowdown in business, we're often asking ourselves, how can we then reduce costs in lockstep with revenue, right? And then when it goes to growth, you expect revenue with the same cost increase. And as we just discussed, it simply wasn't good enough when you were a market leader or you're really looking to change. And similarly, that's why we talk about transformation, because reducing costs in line with a reduction in revenue can happen. But then is it a race to the bottom? Are you really cutting your capabilities and key things? And do you handicap the organization from future benefits and growth and improvement, right? You eliminate the potential capabilities there. So I think that's why it's about transformation, and it's about looking at things a little bit more differently than purely a cost takeout, but with the other elements around agility and organizational capabilities. So the organization at the time, I would say, was, as I mentioned, market leaders. There was a great sense of pride in the company at what had been accomplished and had been done. The culture was very collegial as the firm had grown, and many of the people there had grown together over the years and had shared in a lot of those successes along the way. So there were very high retention rates and very little turnover. The downside to that, unfortunately, was that there was a sense of latency along with that collegiality and along with that past success. And there the focus had come more to effort in terms of how performance was gauged, as opposed to outcomes and deliverables in time. So that was a bit the challenge in mindset and some of the initial capabilities there. I think more from an execution perspective, though, there was a PMO, there was a strong PMO providing transparency and governance. But how about the enablement and being able to help then different teams and different projects and new product parts to launch? That was something that we had to work on. And from an organizational agility perspective, the first, I would say, grassroots of experimentation and implementation had begun in terms of agile ways of working, but there was no consistent approach. So there, every team was choosing their framework or way of working and how they wanted to do it. But there was nothing consistent across that. There was, I think most importantly, though, for us, a curiosity and a desire to find something better, to find something new in terms of ways of working that would help propel the organization forward, to deliver on change, to improve prioritization, which was low to a high degree, to improve accountability across the different areas when it comes to delivery on the new projects and the outcomes and the new products that had to be done, and then how to be more transparent in sharing information across the organization. So that's a little bit the lay of the land in the organization in terms of capabilities when we started.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting what you said about the consistency kind of across the transformation, and being kind of having that consistency is very important, because as you said, usually when you start kind of transformations at the beginning, it's quite easy. Easy in terms of getting early success, right?
Never
everyone's
easy.
Motivated, right? So it's you're running, you will run a pilot, everyone gets excited about it and do that. But in order to do transformation successfully, you absolutely need that consistency, right? And if you take the kind of business agility transformations as well, it's very often it starts somewhere. Agile came from software deliveries of somewhere in the IT department where they show the successes, but you also have to have consistency, but adapt to the conditions. And really adapt as well, understand what the barriers are and adapt to those barriers as well. And we see that with a lot of the organizations that embark, kind of, it starts somewhere there, but then they don't have that consistency and they lose, and they don't understand the barriers. So on that, so what barriers and hurdles you had to address in your role as you were going through the transformation?
Yeah. I think, thinking of the key points there, and given what I just discussed, mentioned about context, there was excitement at the team level in certain areas about new ways of working and wanting to change. But largely as an organization, given past success, there wasn't the highest driver or burning platform to change. And that was something we had wanted to change as a leadership team, as well as a leadership team incoming, as well as the organization. So first we had to start with reframing the mindset and the ambition level in the organization around performance and execution, and getting the leadership on board with that. So the very first thing was about leadership and board level alignment, and ensuring all of us were on the same page. So from the CFO, from a cost and investment perspective, to the marketing officer, to the sales officer, and to all the other functions, ensuring that we were aligned in terms of outcomes and vision, and what success looked like at the end of the 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, and then also as well in terms of the results we wanted to achieve. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing was around then establishing objective criteria on how we were going to measure success along the way. And then from that, being able to then focus on the prioritization of the initiatives we wanted to do. It was a large portfolio, and there we had to have some very difficult and tough discussions about how to streamline it so we could focus our efforts on the initiatives that brought the biggest return. And then I think the last thing was around changing the performance orientation and performance management, which is a very difficult thing to do and takes time in terms of focusing away from effort in what we were doing to really outcomes and results, and how to introduce new ways of working to support that mindset shift in the organization.
Okay. And then, so taking kind of, into account the barriers as well as the goals, right, that you guys have set out for yourself. So what did you do to build the team capability and capacity? How did you guys approach it?
Yeah, we tried a few different things as part of the overall approach that were part of the roadmap of the transformation. And I try to frame it as we wanted to start big and small at the same time. So as you can imagine, with a transformation focused on costs, we did want to, of course, look at benchmarking and best practices. And there we also invested in external help, the forms of consultants and coaches to help bring in the outside expertise, but also the benchmarks in areas where we could focus on cost reduction and cost improvement, but also in areas where we wanted to improve on in terms of new ways of working and being able to get that expertise and an outside-in perspective, as opposed to just trial and error on ourselves, which we still had to figure out. I think that was one thing that helped, and we could start working in those different areas across a roadmap to reduce cost while building on our capabilities. I think another thing was about driving focus and prioritization. So as mentioned before, we really streamlined our portfolio of projects in the organization. We set up some key objective criteria in terms of return on investment that we would expect, in terms of clarity of outcomes and how the potential initiatives were scoped. And from that, we ended up probably cutting 50% of the current portfolio. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty big shift and impact when you do something like that. We also moved away from annual planning and projects that might be of different durations to more frequent planning in the form of quarterly planning as well. So that led to touch points on a more frequent basis, where we could better align on then the key priorities for the next quarter and recalibrate our focus and our investment based on that. And I think what was a really big unlock, Alex, for us was also with the grassroots and starting small and starting quick. So being able to run pilots, though we wanted to have a big transformation with a big impact, being able though to look at small pockets of areas where there could be a big impact within that area, and to trial the new ways of working, to look at really streamlined, focused execution and get the results we wanted. So we experimented with a few new products we wanted to launch with some cross-functional teams, And then we gave them that empowerment. We ensured they were aligned on the priorities for the quarter, and we let them run with it. And there we really saw some of the benefits of new ways of working there, and the improved value and speed to market that we were hoping for that could help drive the revenue increases we wanted to as well.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon a couple of very important aspects for me, at least. And so one is obviously being able to respond quickly to and in an iterative way to things that change, right? Because we know that things will change, and in large transformations especially. So so that's the case. But also, how do you set that alignment with the teams that they can, you can embrace those grassroots, right? And here, one of the great examples kind of from my experience is working for one of the kind of largest retailers in the southern hemisphere, which we started working with them. I think it was 3-4 months before COVID started, right? And we started to implement quarterly review cycles and business review cycles and so on, which kind of saved quite a lot of work for them, because when COVID hit, we were working in their digital space, and they had to shift suddenly from a 10% market penetration of their digital sales, so online shopping, to this growing into 30-40%, which was a massive shift in the business. And how do you do that again with ensuring that you're still profitable and viable business, right? You had to have this alignment across everyone within the team to make that happen. And so those quarterly business review kind of cycles allowed them to shift, for example, how they fulfill the orders, because that was the main problem. Scaling up for your front end and your website is not the problem, but how do you fulfill? So I think they transformed something like 20-30% of their physical stores into dark stores, which then started doing that fulfillment of online orders. Was a huge, but again, they were able to do it pretty much within 1 quarter, based on that very quick reaction, having the processes to do that and react quickly, which is very important. So now shifting gears.
And Alex, sorry, just jumping in on that point, Alex, you made me think of as well, the culture needed to allow for something like that, the changes and the experimentation and being able to pivot and change. And it was clear that you were in a situation there that also allowed it. And that's a key enabler, in addition to some of these transformation practices. And I would say, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight that as well as a key focus area. And they're looking as well to the overall organization, the people there, and also the next generation of leaders to be able to role model the mindset and the behaviors and the culture we were trying to instill. One, looking more about experimentation, looking at prioritization, and looking to make the needed decisions faster to help drive outcomes, and looking to change that performance orientation in time while still making sure we foster collaboration and we have the right behaviors amongst each other, and really focusing on that new wave of leadership as well, which can be flag bearers and torch bearers for that culture change. I think that was also a key part of the change, and I'm sure that was something you found also enabling.
Absolutely. And what's also interesting, we always, it's the fact that a lot of clients we talk to, that so they say, it's easy to have this culture in a digital space, or in financial services a little bit as well, because the world. But how do you actually do it, in capital intensive projects, right? So how can you change that mentality, for example, in building oil rigs? And the exciting part is that it absolutely can happen there as well. Of course, there are certain things that are non-negotiable there that you can't jump over, right? Because you you can't change everything on the go, but there's definitely things that we've done, whether it's in the design phase or so on, that you can enable that cultural change and the change for experimentation and the small incremental delivery, which is absolutely great. Look, and this is a perfect segue to also talk about the culture of how do you learn from your own mistakes. So do you remember a time when it almost went wrong, and can you talk about how you kind of averted that outcome on when it was about to go wrong?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of par for the course, right? That when you are trying to affect change, and you are trying to be thoughtful but nimble at the same time, you do try to experiment because you don't always know what the outcomes are. However, something that I knew and that most of us would agree about is that communication is critical in a large change program. And though we had prepared very thoroughly, and I'll give you an example, there's always, to me, the lesson that you can never over-communicate enough. So, for example, what I'm thinking about where things could have potentially gone wrong was there was one day where we were going to announce to the organization, as part of the overall transformation, our new portfolio of change. So the new products, initiatives that we were going to continue with, which was drastically reduced from the previous portfolio. Because as you remember, we were looking to drive focus and prioritization and ensure that our resources and our people were allocated to the initiatives we wanted to do that were top priority for the organization and most aligned with the strategy, to ensure that we can deliver on them and get the right outcomes. So the day we announced it, when we were all aligned together as a leadership team, we then broke out into smaller discussions, because the announcement was about there are about 600 team members and employees that we communicated to that day. So we had to split it up into a few different sessions, and each leadership and board member would give that communication along with me, and I was going between sessions. And as you might imagine, it was very impactful, and it was very shocking to some team members as well to know that some of their initiatives were now being postponed, and it wasn't going to be a focus for now, but the focus would be on something else, and they would be reallocated and would be supporting some of those other initiatives. Some, in fact, we came to tears due to that. There were some very difficult discussions and challenges, and it gives you a sense of how passionate the people were and tied they were to the initiatives. Though, to your point of alignment, what you do on a team level, if not consistent across the organization, may not have the right impact that you desire. So between the different sessions, we made sure that we got together quickly as a group, and we could align then on some of our responses to take the feedback that we got in those discussions and the tough comments, that we would be able to bring it into the next sessions. Because what we wanted to do was we wanted to avoid, of course, that all these concerns amongst the team members go unaddressed, and then they can sit there and they can then build up, and of course undo the potential change in sentiment that we were looking to introduce with this change, and having some excitement built around the transformation and positive energy as opposed to negative energy as well, and not focusing on the positive outcomes we were looking to drive. So I think being able to align quickly with each other between sessions and to take that feedback into account and relay it in our messaging so we could improve on that communication was key.
And I think you're spot on here, kind of. So two things that kind of stick to me is, one is the human connection, and that comes through also the communication. And I think it's also important that communication is two ways, right? And this is where the feedback comes in, that it's not only about us telling people what we're transforming, what's going to happen, but also listening and understanding how things will be impacted. Because it's very easy, especially from efficiency gains, to come in with a Excel spreadsheet, right? Plug the whole organization into Excel spreadsheet, and then say, you need to cut this part. it's a lot harder to then do it in a way that, first of all, is not detrimental to value creation and revenue, as you said, right? So that's customer centricity and stuff like this. But also very important that it's a sustainable change. So you actually need to look at the work that's being done and remove that work as well, because otherwise that cost will just come back in a very simple, very simple way. But coming back to the feedback, I think with the feedback, it's as I said, it is crucial. And again, having I think business agility helps with that by the constant continuous improvement and the fact that we try to learn from what we can. So that's the case. So very quickly, and I'm getting here kind of messages that we need to move to Q&A, but I want to ask you last question, Ghaleb. So what are the key insights, that you've learned? What are the top 3 hints, lessons learned that you wanted to share with everyone?
Yeah, I think maybe going to the culture and communications point, since we were just discussing it. Culture is really sticky and it's hard to change. So it requires persistent, consistent pressure over time, and positive pressure, ideally, with actions to reinforce it. So going back to the importance of communication, we all know it's important and it's critical. But I think my biggest lesson is that whatever you think is needed and what you've planned, multiply that by 5. Really be persistent in that communication. And then as well, listening to the two-way communication, as you mentioned, and take into account that feedback. So I think that's one. I think the other thing is about really transformation, change begins at the top. So it's important to align with leadership. It's important to discuss, debate, and work out all the topics on this new transformation you're looking to embark on with the leadership, but then ensure that the buy-in is there. And from that moment forward, we're all united in executing it, because leaders will role model and will give signals to that change. And it's important that that buy-in is there, because if the role modeling isn't there in terms of desire or will or behaviors or mindset, that will negatively impact the transformation. So I think the other element is around leadership. And then I think the last thing is around how you approach the transformation. I think the best balance I found through my experiences are through perhaps strong measures, top-down measures on areas where to look for change, but combined with bottom-up grassroots initiatives to pilot and test and learn, also to reduce cost and also to affect change, because we found great success in a lot of the pilot initiatives we ran. So for example, one pilot initiative was around robot process automation. So some automation and digitization we could do within small teams relatively easily. And that very quickly led to a high return on investment, led to reduced manual effort, reduced cost that we could then use to reinvest to help fund some of the bigger ticket items in the transformation. So you start creating a snowball effect and a virtuous cycle in what you're doing. And that's why I'd suggest look at the big items and the investments related to that, but also the smaller items which can help propel that change. And then with that, think about how you're eventually going to capture that value long-term. So not just on the short term, but then the capabilities and competencies you have and how you're going to measure value over the long term. We all know some of the biggest challenges of transformation are value leakage and benefits leakage over time. Yep. And I think, Alex, that could be topic for a whole other discussion entirely.
Absolutely.
But that's something to be aware of.
Absolutely. Ghaleb, thank you very much. It's brought some great memories from while we were both working at ING and having kind of discussions on a regular basis, which is absolutely great. So thank you very much. And Nick, I think that's over to you to moderate the Q&A. So
great. Thank you very much, guys. So we've got some questions have come in. And can I just remind everybody, please use the Q&A tool if you'd like to submit anything now. from the points that the guys have raised and topics discussed. So one of the ones I got earlier was Ghaleb, looking at that particular project, what were you most proud of?
I think I was most proud of, beyond the business outcomes that we were able to achieve, the impact from a people and culture perspective. I think it was truly amazing stepping back after those 3 years and seeing the next generation of leaders having new roles, leading some of the most critical initiatives for the organization, and really being role models of the mindset, the performance orientation, and the collaborative culture we were hoping to do, all while also going through that cost transformation, cost containment. So being able to get the business results while also having the people and culture capabilities built up there. I was really proud of that. That was really awesome to see.
Okay, great. I have another question here. So somebody was asking, what are some other examples? Maybe this is for Alex as well, right? What are some other examples of successful transformations that you've got across other sort of regulated industries, similar to financial services in terms of their regulation, perhaps even including the public sector?
Ghaleb, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So Nick, just repeating the question. So was this about large transformations, also including the public sector and examples of that?
Yeah, so examples of successful transformation in other regulated industries, including things like public sector.
Yeah, sure. So yes, so we've both had experiences in other regulated sectors. So financial services, of course, is one, but you'll also find that within energy sector, of course, there's regulation, and we've had experience there. You'll also find as well that when it comes to healthcare also, and then patient healthcare, there is a very heavy regulated industry as well. So there, I think the challenge is, how do you best balance the allocation of resources and spend to regulatory initiatives, which in a way is your license to operate, so to speak, versus the more business-driven initiatives as well, to be able to propel and drive the business forward. And you need to be able to manage both together. And sometimes they do require different frameworks and approaches. You can't just paint it all with a broad brush. I think you'll try to scope the work in a certain way with the regulatory initiatives to ensure they are done and they are met. But as much as possible, that the resources and work allocated there don't then have to be recycled and changed and reallocated with the business initiatives as well. You'll look to set up stable teams that can persist over time, so you don't have that constant demand and supply management between regulatory and the business-driven initiatives, because the regulatory initiatives aren't discretionary in a sense. They must be done. They're mandatory. So you want to be able to balance the resourcing across both of those. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think this is it's very interesting, because I think it's, for me, it's as well in a heavily regulated regulatory environments. It's a little bit also taking some of the principles of business agility and agile ways of working, which is work with your customers. So you think about also treating the regulatory bodies as part of your stakeholders and even clients in a way. I can give you an example from Malaysia, where we've been part of a large transformation, which was for one of the leading banks there, which was really the first one in the country. And what we've done is we've actually went to the regulator and got them involved in it from the start, by taking them and explaining why the transformation is happening, what is the bank trying to achieve, but also giving them time to think and helping them to understand what that means from a regulatory and from their perspective. Because it is a massive change. So thinking in that sense is absolutely very helpful.
Great, thank you. We've got another question that's come in here. can you talk about, I guess this is to both of you again, can you talk about the importance of change management in large agile transformation initiatives? And what change management frameworks have you used and do you like?
So I can start. So in terms of importance of change management in large agile transformations, you can't do it without it. So it's as simple as that for me. And I think, again, our approach is really about fit for purpose. So that's one. But also thinking, how do you do change management at different levels of the organization, which is also so critical, right? So, on one hand, you have the leadership team where this is, very often things like, providing coaching to the leaders, right? This is a big part of change management as well. And I can give you, examples from working in one of the Dutch banks, and this is not ING, but another one where, working with a member of the executive team where, we've provided coaching and then at the end, asked, so a couple of months later, I asked him, what has changed in your life? And he said, everything has changed, right? And he was fully on board because he said, before the world revolved around me, right? I had my office with my meeting room, and everyone would line up at the door and wait for me to come in and and lay my wisdom onto everyone. And now I need to walk the floors, and I need to ask the right questions to give the context and pretty much tell the teams why we're doing that, and trust that they will figure it out how to do it, right? And he said, oh, so this is part, for me, this is also a big part of the change management. But then looking at the teams, for example, this is not only communication. We do things like job fairs, for example, in the sense of big job fair kind of style meetings where you talk about what is changing, how the roles are changing, what it means for everyone. We have games, we have different presentations, and so on. So that's another aspect. But also, what for me is very important is that you have also the ability to show what good looks like. Okay, and what I mean by that is, Ghaleb talked a lot about the pilots and choosing kind of the MVP approach. This is about choosing this approach and showing what good looks like, so you can build the coalition behind the agile transformation to kind of roll it out across the whole organization. Ghaleb, I don't know what kind of, would be keen to understand your perspective as well.
Yeah, I'd largely echo that, Alex. I'd say that ideally you have a coalition of the willing, so to speak, to use your words, right? So to get that desire and willingness to do it, and change management is absolutely critical. And sure, there's different frameworks and approaches. So you could use the ADKAR model. You could look to the Deming cycle, plan, do, check, act. It's a little bit what my experience is. I related in communicating out that big portfolio change and adjusting our communication and change management through it. But largely it's about how do we support people through this journey, and what you said about making it fit for purpose. So really finding what best fits for the organization from a change management perspective, and from an overall agile transformation initiative. Every organization is unique and has some differences, and we have to ensure that it's fit for purpose and adjusted to it.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. We're slightly over our runtime today, and what we'd like to do now is just ask you if you've any further questions that we didn't have time to answer. Please to drop us an email. Drop me an email there. We've got David, who leads our London office, Piotr out of Warsaw, and myself supporting everyone. Very happy to have a conversation, answer further questions, and take those back to Ghaleb and Alex to answer. So thank you very much for your time today. And if you'd like to keep in touch with us and follow us on LinkedIn. And we have a regular newsletter and blog posts. Please do so. We'll be announcing shortly our next webinars, and I hope you can join us in the future for those. Thank you again for your time, and thank you very much for Alex and Ghaleb for all those amazing points of wisdom today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.